You have 72 hours to vacate the premises, Karen said, standing on my porch with the smugness of a dictator and the confidence of someone who hadn't Googled my name. She held out a notice, fake, obviously, stamped with the Homeowners Association's logo and a forged signature. I sipped my coffee, nodded like a man accepting his fate, and replied, "Make sure you bring backup. The city inspector's gonna be here." I didn't tell her that I was the inspector. Not yet. The morning had started out so peacefully. Birds chirping. My golden retriever, Max, lounging lazily on the porch. I had just finished inspecting a set of newly constructed townhomes on the other side of town, grabbed a hot latte from my favorite cafe, and came home to catch up on paperwork. That's when the knocking began, loud, entitled, and relentless. I opened the door expecting a package delivery. Instead, there she stood. Karen, the HOA president, self-proclaimed neighborhood queen, and the single most problematic human in a 3-mile radius. She wore her authority like a war medal. Oversized sunglasses, clipboard clutched like a scepter, and an HOA badge she probably laminated herself. Behind her stood 2 lackeys, Jeff and Mandy, her personal compliance officers, who had all the backbone of wet tissue. Karen looked at me like I had insulted her ancestors. "This is official HOA business," she snapped, holding the so-called eviction notice like it was the 10 Commandments. "This property has been reviewed and deemed in violation of the revised Residency Bylaw Section 18B, non-conforming occupancy by unauthorized persons." I blinked once. "You think I'm unauthorized in my own house?" Karen scoffed. "According to our records, you're not the rightful owner. The association voted. You've been unresponsive to notices. This home is now considered HOA reclaimable property." That's when I knew we had crossed from petty suburban power trip into full-blown delusional theater. Now, here's the thing. I bought this house before the HOA even existed. I was one of the original 5 homeowners when this community was still under development. The HOA was formed years later, mostly by residents who got tired of beige paint colors and wanted to wield authority over mailbox height and acceptable porch decor. Legally, my property wasn't even under their jurisdiction. But that hadn't stopped Karen from trying every trick in the book. Trash fines, noise complaints, lawn-length citations. I once got a letter because my wind chimes disrupted the HOA president's sense of tranquility. But this? Eviction? It was a new low. I played dumb. "I guess I missed those notices," I said, sipping my coffee again. "Would you mind showing me the documents?" Karen smiled like a spider offering a free hammock. "Of course. I always come prepared." She pulled out a folder filled with fabricated letters, each one increasingly absurd. One accused me of hosting an unlicensed dog. Another said my solar panels were offensive to the HOA's aesthetic harmony. None were stamped by the city. None had any legal traction. But Karen didn't know that. Or worse, she did and thought I wouldn't push back. I let her drone on. Behind her, Jeff and Mandy nodded like they actually understood legal terminology. Karen went full dictator, announcing she'd be entering the property tomorrow to begin inventory documentation. Her plan was to catalog my belongings before having me forcibly removed. "You'll be hearing from our attorney," she concluded, clearly expecting me to panic. "Oh, I bet I will," I said. "But first, you'll be hearing from someone too." She paused, narrowing her eyes. "Who?" "The city inspector." She smirked. "Good. I hope they shut you down." I just smiled. As they strutted off the porch like a trio of mall cops on a power trip, I walked inside and laughed out loud. I hadn't told her the best part yet. I was the city's chief housing inspector. I literally signed the approval papers for this neighborhood. I knew every zoning code, every property line, every legal precedent that protected homeowners from rogue HOAs. And Karen had just attempted to evict me, with a fake document, on camera. Oh yes, my porch cam caught it all. Now I wasn't just offended. I was energized. I pulled out my laptop and began building the case. First, I opened my official records. My name, printed in bold, stamped on the deed. Next, I reviewed the HOA's original charter. My house was marked non-HOA property, excluded. Karen's little kingdom had zero legal power over my land. Then, I scrolled through her fake letters, each one uploaded from a Gmail address ending in .fun, because apparently, that's what she thought law looked like. That night, I called a couple friends on the city legal team. One laughed so hard he snorted coffee through his nose. Another said, "Dude, if she tried that on anyone else, we'd be filing criminal charges by morning." But we decided to let it play out a bit. Because if there's one thing Karen loves more than control, it's attention. And I was going to give her both. The next morning, Karen showed up again, clipboard in hand, sunglasses reflecting the morning sun like a villain's final form. This time, she had a lockbox and a roll of red tape labeled HOA seal. She actually tried to stick it across my front door. "This is a formal notice of seizure," she declared. I filmed her from the porch. "Just need to get a good angle. You're a star now," she posed. "I hope your followers understand you're about to be removed." "Oh," I said, panning the camera, "they're going to love this. Especially the city council." She paused. "Why would they care?" I leaned in with a grin. "Because I'm their housing inspector. And you're impersonating legal authority on camera." Her face fell like a dropped soufflé. Behind her, Jeff and Mandy slowly took a step back. Karen blinked, sputtered, then did the unthinkable. She doubled down. "You're lying. You can't just claim that. I've dealt with city inspectors before. They're not allowed to live in the properties they oversee." I raised an eyebrow. "Karen, you made that up just now. That's not a thing." She pulled out her phone and began recording me, unaware that her own footage was about to become the world's dumbest evidence. "Eviction still stands," she barked. "Oh, don't worry," I said. "It's all going to court. Just not the way you think." The hook was set. The trap was laid. And Karen had walked right into it, clipboard first. The moment Karen stormed off my property in a whirlwind of delusion and denial, I got to work. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to expose every ounce of chaos she'd buried under years of HOA rule. It was no longer about me. It was about every homeowner she'd threatened, every fine she'd issued without authority, and every person who had been too tired or too intimidated to fight back. I was officially done playing nice. The first thing I did was pull up the HOA charter. Not the copy Karen passed out at neighborhood meetings. No, I dug into the original documents filed with the city when the HOA was established. And sure enough, just as I remembered, my property was explicitly marked as non-governed. I wasn't under their domain. My address was grandfathered out when the neighborhood boundaries shifted years ago. Somehow, Karen had ignored that, twisted the bylaws, and crafted her own version of reality. It was like trying to enforce pirate law in a public library. Next, I dug through the emails Karen had been sending out to the community. I still had access to the neighborhood listserv, which she somehow forgot I was part of. Most of her messages had the same unhinged tone: vague threats, questionable citations, and a heavy reliance on fake authority. One email accused a neighbor of violating visual peace by installing Halloween decorations in September. Another fined someone $200 for having an unapproved mailbox, even though the city issued it. But the kicker was an internal message she accidentally sent to the entire neighborhood instead of just her HOA board. It read, "I don't care what the city says. If we don't control the narrative, people will start pushing back. Make examples out of the loud ones." That little gem was going in my report. I started documenting everything, organizing it like a case file. I compiled digital evidence, cross-referenced it with official housing codes, and began drafting a formal report to the city attorney's office. I'd seen HOA overreach before, but this was like a masterclass in unchecked suburban tyranny. I didn't just want to stop her. I wanted this entire HOA structure audited, flipped upside down and rebuilt with proper oversight. Then something unexpected happened. My doorbell rang again. I opened it slowly, half expecting Karen to be back with a marching band and another fake citation. But it wasn't her. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Talbot, holding a tray of cookies and looking nervous. "I heard what happened," she whispered, glancing around like Karen might pop out of the bushes. "I'm so sorry she's doing this to you. She kicked my sister out of her rental here last year. Said she was too noisy, because her wheelchair squeaked on the sidewalk." That stopped me cold. "She evicted your sister?" Mrs. Talbot nodded. "She called it a forced relocation under HOA Wellness Code. Made it sound like she was doing her a favor. But she threatened to fine the landlord if he didn't comply. I invited her in, gave her some coffee, and we talked for an hour. Turns out, Karen's reign of terror stretched further than I thought. Mrs. Talbot wasn't the only one. She told me about a retired couple down the street who were fined for having a birdbath that attracted unauthorized wildlife. A single mom had been cited repeatedly for unmowed grass, despite hiring a landscaper. Another resident had his grill padlocked shut by Karen's compliance officers for violating the Open Flame Tranquility Code. I didn't even know what that meant, but it sounded like something she invented on a wine-fueled power trip. Word started to spread. Over the next 2 days, a dozen more neighbors came by to share their stories, each one more bizarre than the last. Someone said Karen demanded entry into their home to ensure wall paint conformity. Another said she fined them for improper trash vibes. I didn't even ask. But the more stories I heard, the more I realized this wasn't just a one-off feud. It was a pattern, and people were scared of her. Some had considered selling their homes just to get away. That's when I made the call. I contacted a few friends on the city's Housing Oversight Committee. I explained the situation, presented my early findings, and asked for an unofficial audit request. They were more than happy to comply. One of them, Mark, who'd worked housing enforcement for over a decade, called me back an hour later laughing. "You're telling me this HOA president threatened to evict you from a property you own, while you're the chief inspector for the city?" "Yup. Tell me you recorded it." "I have everything. Porch cam, audio, emails, and even her attempt to tape off my door like a crime scene." "Oh, this is gonna be fun." We coordinated an off-the-books investigation for now, just to keep things under wrap. I wanted to give Karen more rope to hang herself. If she really believed she could evict me, maybe she'd try it again, maybe even escalate. I knew her type. People like her don't back down. They double down. They make bigger mistakes. And when they're exposed, they implode. I spent the next day installing a few discreet cameras around my property, not because I was worried for my safety, but because I wanted to capture everything. If Karen so much as looked at my trash bins the wrong way, I wanted a timestamp. Meanwhile, I combed through old HOA meeting notes. They were barely legible, half-typed, half-scribbled, with Karen's initials all over them. Most weren't signed by a board. Some had fake dates. One even listed a meeting that supposedly happened during a citywide blackout. Her paper trail was as sloppy as her legal knowledge. Then came the icing on the cake. I got a call from a city councilman, Rob Kramer. He said he'd received a complaint from Karen about a belligerent male resident refusing HOA orders and impersonating a city official. That's right. Karen actually tried to report me to the city as myself. Rob chuckled. "I told her if she had evidence of impersonation, she should call you directly. You should have heard how fast she hung up." I sat back, staring at the ceiling, amazed by the sheer audacity. She was spinning out and fast. But I wasn't ready to confront her just yet. I wanted it to build. Let her feel like she was winning. Let her keep stomping around like she owned the block. Because the bigger the tantrum, the louder the fall. And fall she would. Karen always had a flair for the dramatic, so I wasn't surprised when she decided to take the situation public. What did surprise me, however, was how wildly miscalculated her next move was. She sent out a neighborhood-wide flyer announcing an emergency community accountability forum to be held in the clubhouse. The flyer claimed she would be revealing the identity of a fraudulent resident posing as a city official and taking steps to restore neighborhood integrity. I read it 3 times just to make sure it wasn't satire. Nope, this was her big plan. A public ambush on me. She didn't know that by the time she printed those flyers, the city had already opened a formal investigation into her HOA practices. She didn't know I'd been working with housing enforcement to compile a complete report of her fabricated bylaws and extortion tactic. She didn't know that her compliance officers weren't even registered under any official HOA code. And most importantly, she didn't know that I would be attending her little forum, with a projector, a manila folder, and a fresh haircut, just to make the takedown look better on camera. The day of the forum felt like preparing for a courtroom finale in a legal drama. I wore a blazer, brought my badge, and walked into the clubhouse 15 minutes early. Karen was already there, pacing in front of a projector screen, sipping from a mug that read Boss Babe like she was hosting a TED Talk. The room was packed. Almost every resident in the neighborhood had shown up, including the ones Karen had previously fined, threatened, or forced into silence. And for the first time, they weren't avoiding eye contact with each other. They were whispering, exchanging glances, waiting for something to happen. Karen spotted me and immediately changed posture, standing taller, lips tightening into a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, well. The imposter has arrived," she said, her voice echoing just enough to sound ridiculous. I nodded politely. "Glad to be here. Should be an enlightening evening." She didn't waste time. She clicked a button, and the first slide on the projector read, "The Fraud Among U.S." It had a photo of my house, a copy of the fake eviction notice she'd served me, and a bold caption that read, "Illegal Occupant." People in the crowd started murmuring. Some looked confused. A few started shaking their heads. Karen launched into her presentation. She explained that I had been posing as a city official, that she'd investigated and found no legal documents supporting my claim to the property, and that she had taken it upon herself to protect the neighborhood from deception. I let her go on, slide after slide, each one more unhinged than the last. She used graphs with no labels, cited bylaws that didn't exist, and even claimed the HOA had the power to reallocate underutilized housing assets. She was basically pretending to be a government official now. Oh, the irony. After 20 minutes of nonsense, she finally gestured toward me and said, "Now, the person in question may try to speak in his defense. But remember, just because someone says they work for the city doesn't mean they do." And trust me, I checked. I raised my hand. "Can I respond now?" Karen nodded, smug. "By all means." I stepped forward, placed my folder on the table, and pulled out my badge. A few gasps rippled through the room. I held it up, then placed it on the projector table so everyone could see it clearly. "My name is Marcus DeLuca. I am the Chief Housing Inspector for the City of Springdale. I have been in this role for 9 years. I oversee all housing compliance, zoning, code enforcement, and residential integrity audits for the greater metro area. And yes, I do own my home. Bought it in 2012. My name is on the deed. I signed off on half the permits in this neighborhood, including Karen's own renovation request for a backyard pergola she didn't actually build." Dead silence. Karen looked like someone had just unplugged her. She blinked once, twice, then tried to recover. "That badge could be fake. Anyone can buy a badge online." I nodded, expecting that. "Sure. Which is why I brought verification." I turned to the screen, connected my laptop, and began my presentation. Slide 1. A scanned copy of my property deed. Slide 2. An official document from the city zoning department stating my address was excluded from HOA governance. Slide 3. Timestamps from Karen's porch visit, complete with audio of her threatening to seize my property. And then, for the grand finale, I played a video montage of various residents, blurred faces, voices modulated for privacy, sharing their stories about Karen's intimidation tactic. The woman with the squeaky wheelchair. The man fined for flying an American flag. The couple harassed over their garden gnome. By the time I finished, half the room was applauding. Karen was turning red. She looked at her so-called compliance officers, who were now staring at the floor like school kids caught cheating. She snapped at them. "Why didn't you check this stuff?" Jeff muttered something about just wanting to hand out flyers, and Mandy quietly slipped out the side door. Still, Karen wasn't done. "This is a conspiracy," she shouted. "He's lying. You're all being manipulated." Someone from the crowd stood up. It was Mrs. Talbot. "Karen, you made my sister cry for 2 weeks after you kicked her out. You're the only one doing any manipulating." Then another voice. "She fined me for my Christmas lights." And another. "She said my daughter's chalk drawings were graffiti." Within seconds, Karen had lost the room. The applause returned, louder now, sharper, more confident. I didn't say another word. I didn't have to. The evidence spoke for itself. Karen turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her like a soap opera villain. No one followed. No one said a word in her defense. The room settled into a strange mix of relief and laughter. People shook hands. Some hugged. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt like a community again. As the forum wrapped up, a few residents approached me, asking what would happen next. I told them the city would be conducting a full audit of the HOA, and that Karen's authority had effectively been suspended pending investigation. The room erupted again, this time not with anger or tension, but with sheer, unfiltered joy. I walked out of that clubhouse feeling like I just pulled a splinter out of an entire neighborhood. Karen had tried to evict me from my own home, but she ended up exiling herself from the only power she ever had. And this was just the beginning. 2 days after the community forum, I received an official court summons, courtesy of Karen. I almost laughed when I opened the envelope. She had filed a defamation suit against me for damaging her reputation and interfering with her duties as HOA president. I guess she thought doubling down on disaster was a winning strategy. Her arrogance was both her fuel and her downfall. And now, she'd given me a golden opportunity to take this circus into a courtroom, where everything she'd done could be scrutinized under oath, in front of a judge, with cameras if we were lucky. Karen had gone from clipboard tyrant to legal plaintiff, and I was more than happy to meet her in court. My attorney, a longtime friend named Dan who specialized in housing law, could barely contain his glee when I brought him the case. He flipped through the paperwork, pausing to chuckle every few pages. "This is beautiful," he said. "She just gave us the stage to bury her publicly. You know we're going to countersue, right?" I nodded. We were filing a civil claim for harassment, false reporting, impersonation of legal authority, and attempted fraud. Between my role with the city and the mountain of documented evidence, Karen didn't stand a chance. But that didn't stop her from trying. The court date was set for the following Monday, and Karen, true to form, spent the week parading around the neighborhood like a general preparing for war. She posted flyers on community boards claiming that I was being investigated for government overreach, and that justice would be served in open court. She even held a Facebook Live session on the HOA page, ranting about corruption, property rights, and how I was one of the bad apples who slipped through the cracks. Her comments were filled with clapping emojis from anonymous profiles she probably created herself. The rest of the neighborhood either ignored her or sent me screenshots, many of them followed by a laughing emoji and a wine glass. What Karen didn't know was that I'd also submitted a motion to unseal her HOA communications for the past 2 years. Every email, every letter, every compliance report. If she wanted a legal fight, she was going to get it with all the lights on. And when those documents came back, they were worse than I expected. There were emails where she openly instructed her compliance officers to invent infractions if necessary, and notes on residents marked as too passive to fight back. One message said, "Don't find Marcus yet. Wait until the next board meeting when I can override the exemption." She knew all along that my house wasn't under her control. She just wanted to make an example out of me. We entered the courtroom with matching manila folders, hers stuffed with nonsense and mine stacked with city-sealed documents, photographic evidence, video recordings, and about 30 witness statements from neighbors. Karen strutted in like she was starring in her own courtroom drama, wearing a power suit 2 sizes too bold and carrying her ever-present clipboard like it was a holy text. Her lawyer, a guy who looked like he'd been hired off Craigslist the night before, followed behind her, already sweating through his collar. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman with no patience for nonsense, read the complaint silently and then looked over the top of her glasses. "Ms. Cranston, you are accusing the defendant of defamation, correct?" Karen nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. He misrepresented himself to the community, damaged my reputation, and caused chaos in the neighborhood." The judge turned to me. "Mr. DeLuca, your response?" I stood up. "Your Honor, I am the Chief Housing Inspector for the City of Springdale. Ms. Cranston has knowingly impersonated legal authority, submitted forged HOA notices, and attempted to evict me from my own legally exempt property. I have filed a countersuit including all supporting documentation." That's when Dan stood and handed the bailiff our evidence packet. The judge took it, flipped through a few pages, and immediately frowned. "Ms. Cranston, did you tell this man he had 72 hours to vacate his property?" Karen hesitated. "I was enforcing community rules." The judge raised a hand. "Answer the question. Did you tell him that?" Karen stammered, "Yes, but I believed—" "Stop. Did you also seal his door with tape labeled, HOA Authority?" Karen's lawyer tried to interject, but the judge cut him off. "Counsel, if you speak again without cause, I will hold you in contempt." The room went still. The judge took her time flipping through the rest of the files. Emails, video screenshots, even Karen's livestream were all included. After a long silence, she said, "This is one of the most egregious abuses of pseudo-authority I've seen in my courtroom. Ms. Cranston, your lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. The countersuit will proceed. We will now move to witness testimonies." What followed was a parade of neighbors, each one delivering a blow to Karen's credibility. Mrs. Talbot described the forced relocation of her disabled sister. A young couple detailed how Karen fined them for leaving a baby stroller on their porch. One man explained how she installed a camera aimed directly at his bedroom window under the guise of monitoring noise pollution. Even the former HOA treasurer testified that Karen manipulated meeting minutes and threatened board members with removal if they questioned her decisions. It was less a trial and more a dramatic reading of her downfall. Then came the digital forensics expert. I had hired him to recover deleted emails from the HOA's online storage. He revealed that Karen had tried to wipe an entire folder labeled Special Violations, which contained drafts of fake citations, templates of letters from a non-existent HOA legal division, and notes about who in the neighborhood was too poor to sue. The courtroom gasped. Karen went pale. Her lawyer turned to her with a look that screamed, "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" By the time the testimonies ended, the judge looked exhausted and furious. "Ms. Cranston, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for criminal review. You are hereby removed from all HOA-related responsibilities effective immediately. Additionally, the HOA will be placed under third-party supervision pending a full audit by the city." Karen looked around the courtroom like she was waking up from a dream she no longer controlled. Her eyes landed on me for just a moment, filled not with anger, but something closer to panic. She had built her little empire on intimidation and empty threats, and now it was crumbling in front of her, brick by brick, with all of us watching. I stepped outside the courthouse into the afternoon sun, phone buzzing with texts from neighbors thanking me, cheering me on, offering celebratory drinks and cookies. But I wasn't done yet. This victory was sweet, yes, but the best part was still to come. Because the very community Karen had tried to control? They were about to decide what came next. And let's just say they had some delicious plans for her farewell tour. The morning after the court ruling, I woke up to the sound of laughter outside my window. It wasn't a normal weekday chuckle or kids playing on bikes kind of sound. It was that cathartic, we survived the storm kind of laughter that only happens when an entire neighborhood finally exhales after years of nonsense. I stepped onto my porch and saw a small crowd gathered around something at Karen's house. Naturally, curiosity got the better of me, and I wandered over, coffee in hand, Max the retriever trotting along beside me like it was just another neighborhood stroll. But what I saw made me do a double take. Sitting right in front of Karen's door was a massive move-out kit gift basket wrapped in plastic and ribbon, with a bright yellow tag that read, "For your next chapter, far, far away." It was glorious. Inside were all the essentials: packing tape, moving labels, bubble wrap, a stress ball shaped like a judge's gavel, and a novelty book titled HOA Leadership for Dummies. There was even a custom mug that said, "I got sued and all I got was this basket." The residents had pooled together to make it, and apparently it had been anonymously delivered overnight. Karen hadn't come outside yet, but her blinds were twitching. She was definitely watching. Later that afternoon, the local news van pulled up. A producer had caught wind of the story from social media. One of the neighbors had posted a short clip of Karen storming out of the courtroom, and it went viral faster than anyone expected. The headline read, "HOA President Loses Power Struggle with City Official in Plot to Evict Him from His Own Home." I agreed to a short interview, mostly to help get the facts straight and give the community some closure. I kept it professional, focused on housing policy, resident rights, and why it's important to know who actually has authority in these situations. Still, I couldn't help but smirk a little when the reporter asked, "So, how does it feel to be the most famous housing inspector in the county?" I just said, "Well, it's not the kind of fame I planned for, but I'll take it." Karen didn't come outside during the entire news segment. Her house was dark, curtains drawn, and the only sign of life was the flicker of a TV screen through the slats. But I knew she was in there, probably seething, watching her legacy unravel with every passing hour. And the hits kept coming. By the end of the week, she had been served with official notice from the city. She was banned from holding any position of authority in the HOA, pending the results of a deeper financial audit. The community's funds were now under lock and key, with a third-party accounting firm appointed to manage them until further notice. With Karen effectively ousted, the neighborhood sprang to life. There was a level of freedom and unity that hadn't existed in years. Residents who once avoided each other started hosting driveway meetup. Sidewalk chalk returned to the sidewalks. Someone even put out a gnome army on their lawn just to test if anyone would say something. They didn't. The mood was light, almost festive, like the first day of summer break. We decided to have a community barbecue that weekend to celebrate what people started calling Independence from HOA Tyranny Day. I offered to host it in my backyard. We strung up lights, brought out the grills, and turned my yard into a full-blown neighborhood block party. People showed up with food, folding chairs, coolers, and big smiles. The retired couple brought their karaoke machine. Mrs. Talbot made her famous peanut butter pie. Even the new family on the corner, who just moved in, came with homemade lemonade and a story about how Karen had already tried to tell them where they could park. They were thrilled to hear she was gone. At one point, a neighbor tapped a spoon against a glass and asked everyone to quiet down. Then, in front of the whole group, they handed me a framed certificate that said, "Neighborhood Hero, 4 services rendered in the Great HOA Uprising." It was funny, heartfelt, and probably the most suburban thing I'd ever received. I laughed, took a bow, and said, "All in a day's work." Someone joked that I should run for HOA president. I smiled and replied, "Only if I get a gavel and a golf cart." Truthfully, I had no interest in running anything. I was just happy the community had found its voice again. The next day, something unexpected happened. I received a formal letter from the newly formed interim HOA committee. They asked me to serve as a consultant, not in an official capacity, but as a resident advisor to help rebuild trust and ensure that the new bylaws were fair, transparent, and legally sound. I agreed, on one condition. Everything needed to be voted on by the residents, no more top-down dictatorship. They agreed, and within days, drafts of the new charter were already circulating. But the biggest twist came the following week. A black SUV pulled up to Karen's house. 2 men in suits got out, state auditors. Turns out the city's referral to the district attorney had triggered more than just a review of her behavior. They were now looking into financial mismanagement. HOA dues had gone missing. Payments made to contractors couldn't be traced. The bank records didn't match the expense report. It was no longer just a civil issue, it was criminal now. Karen was officially under investigation. She left that night. No one saw her go, but the next morning, her driveway was empty. The blinds were open, and the house looked stripped of personality. Word spread quickly. Karen had moved out. Some said she was staying with her sister in another county. Others claimed she went on a cruise to clear her mind. Either way, she was gone. And not a single person missed her. In the end, what started as an absurd attempt to evict me from my own home turned into a full-blown reckoning. Karen had built her authority on smoke and mirrors, and when someone finally turned on the fan, it all came crashing down. But more importantly, the neighborhood had woken up. People realized they didn't have to be afraid of clipboards, empty threats, or made-up fines. They started talking to each other, backing each other up, and recognizing that real authority isn't about power, it's about accountability. As for me, I still live in the same house, with the same porch, same coffee mug, and same loyal dog by my side. Every so often, someone walks by and gives me a knowing nod or a smile. The mailbox no longer carries threats, just mail. The HOA now works for the residents, not the other way around. And on quiet evenings, when the breeze is just right, I sit on that porch and remember the time someone tried to evict the housing inspector, and got evicted from the entire neighborhood instead.